Welcome to Field Notes for Pastors, a conversational podcast for pastors and others in ministry as we explore our soul-deep work in the fields of the Lord. Whether you're in a ministry season of fullness or famine, we want to explore themes around Paul's words in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 6. I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God has been making it grow. In today's episode, I'm just really thankful to welcome Steve Smith as we explore topics of pastoral vitality and pastoral burnout. Steve Smith was born in Charlotte, North Carolina, but has lived, worked, and traveled across the world. He was educated through university and seminaries he attended, but he has been mentored by the writings and voices of Ignatius of Loyola, Dallas Willard, John Philip Newell, Mary Oliver, Wendell Berry, Roger Housden, Belden Lane, and many other trusted souls that have crossed his path. The teachings and the ways of Jesus form the foundation of Steve's insights and writings. Steve and his wife, Gwen, are the founders of the Soul Care Institute, a 2-year training program which helps people practice soul care. They founded Potter's Inn and a retreat center to help leaders in the marketplace and ministry care for their souls. The Smiths have worked with individuals from over 80 countries in soul care, and Steve's books have been translated into multiple languages, while his podcasts contain the core of his teachings with interviews and messages about the spiritual life. And I am especially thrilled to have Steve with us today because Steve has meant a lot to me in my own personal journey as a pastor and a follower of Christ. So welcome, Steve.
I'm so glad, Matt, to be with you. This feels so natural to be with you. So thanks for having me.
It's a joy. It's a joy. I'm just wondering, I've shared that bio, but can you give us a little background on what you're up to now? And perhaps just also a little background on your journey in ministry, including pastoral ministry.
Yeah, after a life of like 50 years of working in ministry, working with marketplace leaders and ministry leaders, Gwen and I built an off-ramp, which required us to move from Colorado to North Carolina. So we're living right at the edge of Pisgah National Forest, which you explained in that intro. And I do some spiritual direction with some people that I love and that I care for and want to continue walking as I continue my journey. And I am currently finding my new voice as a poet. So I have just published my first book called Greening, and maybe we'll talk about that here. But that's my life. It was really birthed, Matt, out of a long, winding obedience in the same direction. But really, it began when I converted to Christ as a university student in January 1973. That's like a long time ago. But in that conversion, it was a Damascus Road moment. I fell off the horse of my fraternity and wiped the scales off my eyes, and I saw life and God and my friendship with Jesus begin. And it really led me to then go to seminary and then start my first pastorate in North Carolina outside of Charlotte, and then move to the Netherlands where we church planted and started an international church with 50 different nationalities in our congregation. And from there came back to Durham, North Carolina, and was the senior pastor of a mega church, which is now multiplied to become the largest church in North Carolina, called the Summit. But it's at that church that I had my implosion in 1996. And we were having 4 worship services on Sundays and deacon meetings and weddings on Saturday. And oh, by the way, Gwen and I had 4 boys, all at the age under 10 years old at that time. So life was very, very busy. And I hit a wall, and in order to save my life and save my marriage and save any hope of ministry, I fled to a monastery with Dallas Willard in 1996. This is right before The Divine Conspiracy was published. and spent a month with him in that monastery. And that's where I did my great unlearning, my great giving up of certainty. It's where I was exposed to mystery and living in a monastery, living in the rhythms of those monks, and with Dallas, who kind of handheld me as an extrovert, how to discover my own soul. And sadly, Matt, I had been helping other people save their souls, but for many reasons, which I think we'll get into, I was really unaware of my own soul. I became a workaholic. Work became the liquor for me, and it was the liquor that the church served out in great mugs of plenty with lots of whipped foam on it, and I drank it all. I drank the dregs of it. And I really became intoxicated with the church. I became intoxicated with my importance. I became intoxicated with my performance. And it did me in, and it did our marriage in. And so I had to unlearn probably 90% of what I had amassed in the university, what I had amassed in discipleship by many great authors, and many great retreats that I went on. I had to go back to the basics. And it was really in that moment, in a private spiritual direction session with Dallas Willard, that the vision of starting a new work, of starting Potter's Inn, of moving out of the Bible Belt and moving to Colorado and being baptized by beauty and nature and the glorious Rocky Mountains, that I really found my heart. And so from there, we built the retreat center, and that's where people from all over the world started coming. I was able to write The Lazarus Life. That was the book that kind of put Potter's Inn on the map, proverbial map, so to speak, because people read that book and said, wow, what you described on page 34 is my story. I want that. And that's really the story of Lazarus coming back to life. So that's my life in a nutshell, and it's been a great and wonderful and glorious ride. And I'm happy, and I feel honored, Matt, to be in conversation with you talking about this subject of burnout and soul renewal today.
I'm so thankful, Steve, just the openness, vulnerability of opening your story. I think if there are people in ministry listening to this, I think there are some who are probably going to think, oh, you achieved what I'm trying to achieve. And then there's others who may also resonate with this kind of feeling of, I think you described it as, I was helping other people find their souls, but I hadn't found my own, or maybe it was eroding from the inside. And I know that time, we've talked about it before, that time with Dallas Willard was so pivotal for you. And I'm wondering if you could speak to just a little bit about were there specific things that Willard shared with you at that time? You talk about it as an unlearning, a relearning. What was it about that time with him that was so pivotal for you?
Well, put it in context. These are the days of Bill Hybel at Willow Creek. These are the days of Rick Warren. I probably went up to Willow Creek 25 times, led pilgrimages up there, trained with all these great influential leaders. And that was in the day that I think leadership became a cult. And I was in that cult of leadership greatness and exponential leadership and all these words that we're so into, many of us still are, that I think really need to be dismantled and brought down and understand we have really copied the ways of the world, not the ways of Jesus. And it was really Wendell Berry who said that, as he understood Jesus, that Jesus's great attempts was not to start a new religion, but to offer a way of life. And that's what captured my heart. And that's what Dallas taught me, is the way of Jesus. I was an extrovert. I was a Baptist. I was a doer. I didn't know about being. I didn't know about my inner life. I didn't know I had an inner life. I had never really examined those great passages of Paul where he talks about the inner person in Ephesians 3 and the renewal and the Christ in me. That all sounded like Japanese. And Dallas spoon-fed me. That was his great gift. When you read The Divine Conspiracy, it's a great, complex, massive book. But Dallas as a man was a very simple teacher who was not into his own grandiosity. And so having spent 30 days with him one-on-one, I completely got stripped down. And I didn't even know how to do solitude. I didn't even know how to do silence. And I remember him teaching me how to go, and I want you to go out and walk the grounds. And this was a walled monastery there in Sierra Madre, California. You've probably been to it, Matt, near Fuller Seminary. And it's walled, and he'd say, go out and spend time with Jesus. And I thought, I don't even know what you're talking about. And so I tried it, and I went out and I leaned against that wall, and off in the distance in the smog of Southern California, I saw the bright green aura of a Starbucks sign. And I heard those people laughing and clinging their coffee cups and caramel macchiatos. And so on my first 3 days with Dallas sending me out, I climbed the monastery wall, went to Starbucks, ordered caramel macchiatos, and then came back, climbed the wall, and then Dallas made us sit in a circle and asked this question in his Missouri voice: what did Jesus say? And I remember lying to Dallas Willard by making stuff up that Jesus had said, and Jesus hadn't said anything to me. I didn't know how to listen. I didn't know how to still the committee that was taking place in my head, the board meeting in my brain. It was busy. I was a little bit, not so much ADD, but just it was very loud in my inside world. And most of those voices were condemning voices, many of them. You're not enough. You're no good. Why don't you make yourself, you're never going to amount to anything. You've got to do better. You've got to write better. You've got to perform better, and especially do, all about doing. And so it was through Dallas that I finally figured out, he taught me how to quiet the inner voice so that I could listen to that still small voice that I had never been acquainted with, that I only read about in Ezekiel's life. And I thought that was for him. It's not for me. But Matt, come to find out, it's for all of us as sons and daughters of God to really create a pathway, a safe space in our nakedness, not with our degrees and our resumes, but our nakedness to really be in the presence of God. And so from that moment, how to help people do what happened to me became kind of my new marching orders, so to speak. And I went back and gave Gwen her first copy of a Henry Nouwen book, and she had a panic attack. Gwen's a missionary kid born in Africa. She had never read a book by a Roman Catholic, and there she just began to read, and in our marriage to figure out we got derailed. We got derailed from the beautiful intimacy space with Jesus for the business of the Empire Church, and really began in our life and our marriage to make sausage and sausage and sausage. And we became a part of the sausage factory. And then come to find out, I woke up that I didn't like that sausage. And so, I know this is, sadly, many of the leaders will say, Matt, why are you having him as one of your first guests? But it's really not my story, Matt. And coming to find out and working with hundreds of pastors across the world, many, if not most, feel like they too have been enslaved to work in the sausage factory. And they're waiting. When Jesus talked about the easy yoke and the unforced rhythms, and you can recover your life, they think, I don't have a clue how to do this. And so my life has been dropping breadcrumbs for people, for them to find a new way to eat, a new way to be, a new way to live, and really then a new way to offer that to others that is healthy, out of sustainability, out of a posture of thriving, not survival.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of people in ministry who get to that point that you're describing for yourself, where it is a little bit like you're asking yourself, how did I become who I am now? How did I get here? What am I doing? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And I love that description you said of we're so caught up in the business of the Empire Church and doing this stuff, but we realize it's not actually giving life. It's sometimes not giving life to us who are doing it at all. And that encounter with Willard, I love your honesty about climbing over the wall and getting that Starbucks. I mean, I think the honesty there is part of the key to this whole journey and discussion that we're trying to get at with pastoral burnout or pastoral vitality. It requires deep honesty with ourselves.
Radical honesty, radical courage. And I love the word courage in the French language because the root of the word courage is le coeur, the heart. And so courage is birthed in the heart. And in my case, and in so many cases, Matt, of men and women that I've worked with, to help them discover the four chambers of their heart and to keep going deeper and deeper into that dark fourth chamber to find out where the secrets, where our past is hid, where the patterns of our life, where we were nurtured to become workaholics. Like I was nurtured by the church. I was nurtured by my father. It's the way I thought you became a man, by just working 60 hours a week. And that's where I just started drinking the liquor early. I was an alcoholic, but my liquor was the church. The elixir was the church. It wasn't bourbon. My bourbon was the Empire Church.
That's a statement I feel like we could sit with for a moment, just to consider, for anybody who is listening to this, to ponder, is there something of our story in what Steve is saying? I've found aspects of that. We've talked about it before in my own story. And I think a lot of this ties into what became kind of a crisis moment for you. You talked about it in your ministry, in your marriage, in your approach to pastoring and what you were about. You have done spiritual direction with a lot of people, Steve. And so I wonder if we just hone in a little bit on that experience of pastoral burnout or ministry burnout. You've mentioned a lot of different things. I mean, what do you think are some of the reasons people end up finding themselves in places of burnout? I can pull out some of the strands of what you've said. You've mentioned a number of things, but if you had to just hone in on a few things, what do you think you would say causes that or leads us into that sort of a place?
Yeah, I thank you. And knowing you were going to ask me that, I wrote down some notes early this morning. I came up with 5 reasons why people burn out and what the core causes of burnout are. This should be a book if somebody wants to write it. I've done my writing, so it's your turn, Matt, to write this book or read. But the first reason why people have a tendency towards workaholism and burnout is that the question of their own identity is not addressed. I mean by that, their identity is their identity as the beloved of God. And when Jesus was baptized by his cousin John standing in the river, the voice came crashing through the air and said, "You are my beloved son." And if you remember, Matt, Jesus hadn't done anything. He hadn't healed anyone, taught anyone, gone to the Sermon on the Mount, created a band of followers. He was told he was the beloved without doing.
Mm-hmm.
And most of us, especially in North America, in the Empire Church, we can't figure this out because we are so celebrated and validated by our doing. It's on our business cards, it's on our name tags, it's on our websites, our doing, our performance. But our identity is the essence of who we are. And our essence is that everyone who is listening to us, everyone, is the beloved child of God. And that God sees us as we are, as God created us to be, without striving, without climbing the ladders of success, and then realizing you've been climbing the wrong ladder like I did all my life. But in my essence, we can stand knowing that we are the beloved. And that message is spoken. It had to be spoken into Jesus. Who are we to think that we don't need it to be spoken into us? Or that we could read a book and get it? No. God spoke it into Jesus at his baptism, and he spoke it again repeatedly at his transfiguration. And I also think that when Dr. Luke wrote the biography of Jesus in Luke 5:14, it says, Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. And in those lonely places, Matt, I'm imagining, I know with quite certainty that what happened in that lonely place is that Jesus heard who he was. Jesus, thank you for coming away and leaving those guys. I just want to be with you. I want us to have time. Let's rest. Let's talk. And we've so formalized this. We just think this doesn't happen anymore. This only happens to monks, or we have done a transaction to think that the sermon on Sunday morning is that experience, and it is not that experience. Intimacy is best defined, and spiritual intimacy is best defined phonetically, into me see. And that's when you're inviting God to see into you. And then it's reciprocal. God is saying, here I am. It's that beautiful story of God looking for Adam in the Garden of Eden when God is walking along. And then he says, I'm looking for you, Adam. Where are you? And so I start with that question, Matt, as you know, in our own conversations is, where are you, Matt? Where have you been? Where have you been walking? Who have you been listening to? And if we listen to the voices in our church and we listen to the American national church and all these issues, we're hearing unhealthy men primarily and a few unhealthy women tell us something that isn't the truth. It isn't the gospel. Because the gospel begins with our identity, reclaiming our belovedness. Henry Nouwen says, you are the beloved, but then you spend the rest of your life becoming the beloved. I think the second reason for so much pastoral burnout and ministry burnout, and this is true for people in the marketplace, is we're in a tremendous search for significance. We become addicted to performance. And the words of the country song, which I think is the national anthem of anybody who is burned out, is that great country song, Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places. We are looking for love by somebody to come up and say, you're the greatest preacher since sliced bread. You're just the most awesome. Would you please come and preach my funeral? Would you marry me? Only you. Only you, only the pastor, not some little lowly peon, only you. And that feeds, Matt, the dark shadows of our soul, which it's the darkest place in the fourth quadrant of our heart that wants us to become grandiose, wants us to stand there with Jesus when he was tempted and saying, I can give you all this kingdom. I'll give you the whole kingdom. You'll be this pastor and this bestseller and this seminar leader, and people will flock to your website if you work harder, if you look slick. Matt, I remember the days of coming to different churches, and they would invite Gwen and I in to do soul care. And right after we would leave the room, the next person would come in and do image management for the pastor leaderships, managing, recommending how they look and what the clothes are. And I'll never forget being at one mega church in the Midwest when the guy who came in right after us said, well, if you get a tattoo, then put it here, because that's what people really want to see. They want you to be relevant. And we began in those days to drink the liquor of relevance, not unlike how we're doing it today, by being powerful, by being verbose, by being knowledgeable, and then offering what we think is knowledge. Want me to go on, Matt, or should we?
I do. I'm just thinking about this, like you're talking about the lack of identity being rooted in our belovedness as kind of a starting point. And that seems like it connects so strongly then because of that. If we don't have that in place, or if we're not leaning into that, then we lose kind of an anchoring that then does lead us to search for significance in so many other people or so many other accomplishments or so many other things. So those two things fit together well.
There is no starting place apart from your identity. No matter what book you think you've read and what you think you know and what expert you can follow, you must go back to the waters of your own baptism and stand there and hear the voice for yourself that you are beloved. And until you hear that voice, you have nothing to minister to, because you're ministering out of performance. The greatest understanding of belovedness is offering. You offer your belovedness through your ministry. You don't offer seminars. You offer your heart, your bloody, messy, vulnerable, courageous heart. And in that, as Nouwen says, you become the wounded healer.
Yeah.
You are no healer unless you're wounded, unless you have empathy, unless you can enter the pain of others by going into your own pain.
Yeah, and then our ministry doesn't flow out of our perfection or our image. It actually flows out of our brokenness that's been held by the hands of the lover of our souls. You know, it's a very different thing.
It's a whole different paradigm, and it's not a sausage factory, because you're not producing sausage. You're not producing categories, and this is nothing. I'll never forget, Matt, going into a mega pastor's house in Colorado. They gave me a tour of his home, and his wife said, come see our home, and then we'll go to dinner. And so we went into the home, and there he said, well, here's my treadmill. And I looked down on the treadmill, and there was an Excel spreadsheet of the numbers and statistics for the past 3 months. That while that guy is working out, he's looking at an Excel spreadsheet, working on the numbers, as if the numbers are the matrix to the abundant life. Numbers are no matrix to live the abundant life.
Well, I think I'm eager to hear what your next points are too. You said you have a list, so keep us going.
Well,
Number 3.
I only have this list. I don't function by that, Matt, but because I knew you were going to ask me, I came up with it. I think the third one is role and soul confusion. That we're just confused of our role and then our soul. And as I age, I'm 71 as we're recording this, Matt, that I just think that little phrase right there helps me clarify that often I lived out of my role, not my soul. I lived out of my role with Gwen. Gwen said that our first 10 years of marriage, she saw me walking around in our house with like a firefighters or an emergency driver of an ambulance, and that if somebody would call or someone would email, the light would go on, my helmet would start swirling, and just think, I got to go help people. I didn't know I was the crash victim. I didn't know that Gwen and I had derailed on the train of our marriage, and we were lying in a ditch, just having children, and me working my butt off in the church, in the sausage factory, and called that my life. The exhausted life is not the abundant life.
Hmm.
Anyone who lives in a posture of exhaustion is not living the abundant life. They're not experiencing the abundant life. So we need to redo the math of our soul and figure out how do we do that. And so when we rethink our role in our soul, for me, it had to be, I had to learn about my soul, that I had a soul, that I am a soul. Mm-hmm. And in my soul, there are some places that need healing. And I had to go into counseling. I had to go into spiritual direction. It's not a have to, but I was so desperate, there was no other choice. The only choice for me was to check out. And I mean, just ending it all.
Yeah.
And I think many of us are privately fascinated. I mean, because I really do think, Matt, that most pastors, especially today in the 21st century, are very, very unhappy in their work and their life. And they want change, but they don't know how to bring change. They need a new model of how to do their life. And it starts with your soul. It starts with valuing. If you value your soul, you will love your soul, and then you'll care for your soul, and you won't prostitute your soul. Your soul will give you the courage to say no to people, no to leaders about your time, saying no to them so that you can say yes to your day off.
I can hear one voice in the background, Steve, of somebody saying, yeah, but Jesus said, if you want to be my disciple, you've got to take up your cross and follow me and die daily. What would you say to somebody who's going to quote that in response to what you're saying? It sounds like you're saying that's not required, or I should ease off on that. Talk about that a little bit, because I think a lot of people in ministry feel that kind of drive in the back of their heart or back of their mind.
I've heard that all my life, and it's just a lie. To deny yourself is to really do the work of your heart, to go into that fourth quadrant and pull out the junk that you have been carrying around, and to do some cleanup work and some healing work. That's denying the self of your persona, denying your personality, denying the cult of leadership, denying the flow that everybody's doing it this way, that this is how Bill did it, this is how Mike did it, this is how Sally did it. No, we're individually, and we are individually and fearfully made, and we need to do our work, our inner work, Matt. We cannot do outer work without doing inner work. To do the outer work of ministry is to choose to work at a sausage factory. To do the inner work, the inner invitation to be healed, to be restored, to admit that you are the guy on the Good Samaritan. We are the guy, we are the woman that got beat up, and we need to go to a place to get our healing. And then we can emerge and come back out. Until we're healed, we're only sharing disease, the disease of busyness. And this is what Dallas Willard spoke his famous quotes about eradicating hurriedness from your life.
Yeah.
But let me get to another one, which is so important. This would be the absolute key. Again, I'm just thinking of the hundreds of pastors that I've worked with who are burned out, who have come to me. When I looked closely, there was absolutely no sense of rhythm in their life. They tried to balance their life, but they didn't know about rhythm. Living in the 6-1 rhythm, 6 days of work, 1 day totally off, 1 day of Sabbath. And to know that Sabbath means to cease. It doesn't mean a 2-hour let's go to lunch. That's not a Sabbath. The body, the soul needs a whole day to come down. It's the beautiful song that the Quakers sing. 'Tis a gift to be simple. 'Tis a gift to be free. 'Tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. Most pastors don't have a clue of how to come down. And when they start coming down, they feel guilty. And they feel constantly available. This is the big lie of the sausage factory, that you have to be constantly available on your phone to buzz or ding or sing. And that if it does when you're out to dinner with your wife and that your pocket is buzzing or your chest is buzzing, you feel that and you're distracted. You're not really present with her or with him because you're so available. Mm-hmm. This is why Luke, who was the doctor, said he often withdrew. And do you know what the word often means, Matt? Luke 5. It means a heck of a lot. That's the Greek meaning.
That's the original Greek.
When he said he often withdrew, and it doesn't mean, oh, I'm going to go on a weekend away in 3 months, or I'm going to go do this. No, because we're so wired up, we're so amped up, we're so intoxicated by the liquor and the drug of our work that we need a lot of time to come down. Mm-hmm. This is what I never knew until Dallas showed me how wired up, how amped up, how driven I really was. And what I was offering Gwen was my drivenness, not my tenderness.
Yeah, that idea of Sabbath literally meaning to cease, to stop, and to bring an end to that, like that frenetic, grinding sense of I must always be available, I must always be the one. And it sort of puts us into a place of humility. I run to the end of myself. I cannot be God. There is only one God. Yeah. And I think I've found in my own life the same sort of thing of that inability to cease and to try to balance everything and spin the plates. And you start to feel like you got too many plates spinning. And really what you need is a Sabbath. What you need is to withdraw.
To try to live a balanced life is to succumb to the culture of a lie. We're not created to live a balanced life. We're created to live in rhythm. Mm-hmm. And as you know, Matt, I wrote a whole book on this called The Jesus Life. Maybe that could be in your podcast notes.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes.
But finally, let me just mention this, that we live in a culture that celebrates and validates busyness and doing over being and lingering. That L word, that sounds like a cuss word. Linger. Or if you're from the Midwest or California, you probably say curse, but down here in North Carolina, we just say cuss. And lingering, we don't know how to linger. And let me give you a 1 hour time slot. Let me give you 15 minutes to Zoom with you. Let me do this. It's all time management. Ministry, an American sausage factory empire church, has become time management. It isn't walking with people, sitting with people, and definitely not listening to people, and absolutely no listening to your own heart. And so this celebration of the tyranny of the urgent, we're just breathless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the pastor or those in ministry, by nature of that atmosphere, feel the same way. We become almost like cattle drivers ourselves, feeling cattle driven, and can view God that way as well. But really, what you're saying is there's an invitation from the living God to draw away, to recover our belovedness, to linger in loving attention with God, and to let him speak over us and meet us who we really are, not our false selves or our glittering images, just to draw near to him and encounter him in a powerful way. I think all those things you said, Steve, so many of us in ministry relate to and struggle with. And you've also given us invitations, I think, with each one of those to recover our belovedness, to get in rhythms, the idea of Sabbath, to step outside of busyness, to linger. There's some beautiful things that you're putting before us here. When I think about this, I think about your journey, and I know that you have been kind of moving into the work of writing, not nonfiction, not ministry books in the sense that we typically think of them, but you've been writing poetry a lot. And maybe you could even speak to how poetry has been shaping your soul. And I think of, one of my heroes, Eugene Peterson, who regularly read poetry and extolled the reading of poetry for pastors and those in ministry. What's poetry been doing to you? I don't want to make it just utilitarian, but how have you been changed by the work of reading and writing poetry?
Yeah, and let's just put this in the context of pastors who actually know the Bible, there are 150 poems called the Book of Psalms.
Mm-hmm.
And those poems were actually the prayer book of Jesus. He knew those poems. He said those poems. He quoted those poems. And he lived those poems. So poetry really is embedded in the Judeo-Christian heart of how to be a lover of God. And poems are the expression of the songs in our hearts, whether it's lament and grief and anger and frustration, which, by the way, 50% of the Psalms are psalms and poems that are very angry. Mm-hmm. Where were you, God? I'm just mad. I'm so disappointed in you. To the beautiful consolation, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Oh my gosh. Mm-hmm. We just are wanting everything. Most of us want bigger churches and better churches, but to read Psalm 23, I shall not want. What would that be like to live in a not wanting season where you don't want to change your church address, but you want your soul to change, not your paycheck to change? These are big, big statements. Mm-hmm. And they really require an unlearning of how to view life, how to view church, how to view Jesus.
Mm-hmm. And I think poetry deeply connects with that lingering that you're talking about.
Yeah, poetry was birthed in me in the COVID years when I was leaving Potter's Inn, leaving from traveling. Every week I was on a plane flying somewhere, speaking, writing, doing soul care intensives. And then we moved to Charlotte to start our off-ramp, and COVID hit. And I had to face my own inner exhaustion and leaving my team, leaving my friends, leaving the ministry I had founded, and had to reestablish my own identity as the beloved. This was my invitation now to live a life of caring for my own soul and not think it's selfish.
What I'm hearing inside of what you're saying is that we've lost our way, and there's an opportunity for us to come back. There's an invitation from God to enter back into what matters most, what's at the heart of the universe, which is our belovedness in God through Christ, and finding that to be our deepest reality and not getting caught up in all the other things. And for us as pastors and those in ministry, we are easily caught up with so many other things. And I find that to just be a powerful invitation you're giving to us today, Steve. I want to just kind of draw us to a close right now. And just, first of all, I want to thank you for being a part of this with me today. It's just a joy for me to have you pierce into what can be in areas that's so largely ignored by pastors, avoided by pastors. And if people who are listening want to kind of catch up with you, find out what you're doing, what's the best way for them to follow on with what you're doing right now?
Well, the easiest way is just to find me on our website, pottersinn.com, pottersinn.com. And there's a link there to go to. I write poems on the Substack. You can join me there, and a link to my books and then to the news there. But, you know, Matt, I'm on my off ramp. And so much of what I'm just imagining, how has the pastor in Minnesota heard this? It's just like, oh, Matt, why would you ever have a 71-year-old guy? Well, because when you're 71, you get some perspective, and you also feel some freedom to say some things. And so I hope that the freedom and the perspective that I've offered, it may not be the ticket to everything, but there's something here for everyone to reflect upon, to have a discussion on, to linger with, and to find a friend to say, hey, listen to this podcast with me. Matt, that's the beauty of your book, that your readers and your listeners are going to discover, that you offer them the beautiful organic metaphor, not about the cult of leadership, but the organic model of sowing and tilling and gardening. This is the metaphor of the heart, that our hearts and our souls need to be we need to winter.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to just realize we can't be planting seeds in January in Wisconsin. Why don't we just let people winter and kind of let them, give them permission to rest? Why don't we trim our services back and down and just get lean, like nature gets lean, like the squirrels get lean, like the birds get lean, and we give people a chronological way to live in rhythm by saying, in these months, we're not going to have these kind of meetings and these kind of gatherings. We want you to stay home. We want you to winter well. Let's come to church and make worship our priority, but everything else. I know even that sounds un-American, un-evangelical, but I really do think it's very big on Jesus.
It gets the focus in the right place.
The focus is in the right place.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Steve. Thanks for being part of this with me today, and thanks for being a friend and part of my life.
You're one of the great men of my life, Matt, and it's my joy to be your walking companion through this life. I have no greater joy than to watch you and to walk with you and to see you on a regular basis. And that's what I would encourage all of our leaders, that you can't do this work alone. You need to work and walk with somebody else. And that's the beauty of a spiritual direction, or just a friendship, an anam cara, as the Celts say. Thank you for having me, Matt.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Field Notes for Pastors. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it with a friend. Give us a like or subscribe to this podcast on platforms where you listen. This podcast is linked with my forthcoming book, The Pastor as Gardener, a renewed vision for ministry, set to be released by Erdman's Publishing on March 24th, 2026. You can pre-order the book anywhere good books are found. And if you do pre-order the book, I have put together some resources as a gift to you. Find out how to access those pre-order resources via my website, mwerickson.com. Until next time, may you experience God's grace wherever God has planted you.